Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, this is the 200th episode of Healing the Spirit. I am just so amazed. When I started this project, I did not think we were ever going to go this far. I just had no expectations. So first of all, I want to express my gratitude for the spirit of this podcast. I feel so humbled to be the steward of this project, that the spirit of this podcast chose my voice as a vessel for this work. And yeah, I am simultaneously very humbled and very proud. And whether you've been listening to this podcast for years, or if this is your first episode, or if you're somewhere in between the two ends of the spectrum, I am just so grateful that you are here. Thank you for participating, for giving life to this project, quite literally, because, well, we would not be here without you listening. And if you have loved this podcast, as always, I really appreciate you giving us generous ratings, beautiful comments, and sharing it with people in your life. So thank you in advance. Okay, so I'm recording this episode as the Venus Cazimi, which happens in the midst of the Venus Retrograde cycle in Aries and Pisces in 2025, is happening. We are literally like hours away from this transit exacting. And I'd like to speak to the universal human experience of feeling unloved, of feeling the tenderness of being yourself in a world that doesn't necessarily know how to make you feel received, how to make you feel safe, how to make you feel seen and held and safe to express your truest essence. And I'd like to start by sharing my own tender and very personal experience growing up. I'm offering my own story as a mirror so you can find your own reflections, as a parable so you can find your own truth. I also think that my story is very much a parallel to the Venus Cazimi experience, which I'll explain later. So get cozy and just let this be a little storytelling time. When I grew up, for more than half of my schooling life, I was bullied at school. I felt extremely alone. I felt abandoned. I felt disconnected. I felt like all my actions were misinterpreted by the people I spent the most time with, which, you know, when you were a child going to school, right, you really spent most of your time at school. So I felt this tremendous pressure to perform well academically from the teachers and also from home. And when I excelled, all I got was kind of this backlash from my peers who consistently were making fun of me for being different, for being ambitious, but also for straying away from their expectations and projections of how a boy should behave. You know, I was bookish, I was artsy, I was definitely eccentric and queer and fluid in my expressions, from how I formed my thoughts, to how I walked, how I responded to things that people said, the kinds of music I was enjoying listening to. And looking back, I've been finding a lot of solace and inspiration from this younger version of myself. Because this younger version of me had zero interest in yielding or changing their behavior for others. I had zero interest in changing myself just to fit in, because even though it was really painful, I felt very alienated and often very alone. I didn't know what belonging felt like. I also had a strong, unshakable connection to who I am. And I loved who I am. Underneath all the layers of self-doubt and all this pressure that I put on myself, I've always known on a really deep level who I am. And I had a deep and abiding experience of my own essence. For many, many years as an adult, I couldn't see how defiant little me was. There was this layer of fear and trauma that really kept me in this fight or flight mode constantly, and I mostly poured it into my work. I always had this kind of crazy work ethics. I've always been an artist. I love making things. I love making music, poetry. I love writing. I love creating these podcast episodes. I love creating courses and communal online experiences. And parallel to that love, I also struggle with feeling like I'm not good enough. And I struggle with, frankly, being scared of what other people are going to say about my work. Part of my trauma is having this nagging, persistent thought kind of floating around me that one day someone's just going to say something really awful about me, and then everyone else is going to turn against me, because that was the only experience I really knew growing up. But recently, something has shifted, and I can't quite pinpoint what has shifted, or at least it's not making sense in my head yet. But I took a little bit of a pause from kind of the intensity of how I've been doing things. And what I discovered was how alive I feel at this moment, and excited. And frankly, I feel so blessed to be able to share my work with other people. I've been feeling the sense of, wow, I can't believe that I'm alive. I can't believe I get to share my thoughts. And I can't believe I live in a world and in an era where it's so easy to share my thoughts. I can't believe I get to record podcast episodes and share it with other people. I can't believe there are people out there enjoying and even sometimes sharing reflections of how it's benefiting them. And so, along with that feeling of being really grateful for the opportunity to do healing work for myself and for other people, for being able to have this really beautiful practice of communing with the planets and with my spirit team and working with clients and students, I started recognizing how a big chunk of that layer of trauma from my experience growing up has lifted. And what I really saw underneath the layer of trauma is, again, this version of me as a child that was really quite a badass. This version of me was uncompromising, unrelenting in their commitment to being authentic and pouring their efforts and energy into the things they actually value, right? Despite their experience not being celebrated, not being loved, not being honored, not being respected for who they are, they kept going. They marched forth, you know? I really made that as a joke because my birthday is March 4th. And I marched forth as a child, you know? I was unstoppable. And so I got curious. I was like, how did that child get so resilient? Where did that teenage version of Jonathan, where did they get their strength from, right? How did they make it through? And two things kind of came to my mind when I was reflecting. One was I kept thinking about how lucky I am to have this really special bond with my maternal grandmother as a child. I still remember to this day the way that my grandma used to look at me. There was so much love and there was just this deep acceptance. It's like she could see more than just my child body, more than just what I represented to her. I could see that she could really see my spirit. And to have someone earlier on see you through that lens, not as a child that needed to be disciplined or controlled or contorted into some version that can satisfy her expectations or her ego, but as a sovereign spirit that is worthy of full love and acceptance, was just beyond. It was truly such a gift. And then the other experience I had was this really mystical experience I had when I was a child. I was about 7, which, for those of you astro nerds, you know that 7 it represents the Saturn square, so I think there's significance there, definitely. But when I was 7, I had this direct experience with the divine. I was attending an Easter puppet show at Sunday school, and they were reenacting the story of this taxi driver who gave his life up protecting this child that he didn't know. It was a parallel to Jesus sacrificing his life, right? And I remember seeing this really bright and somewhat pinkish light, and having that light fill up my heart and fill up my entire body. And I think in that moment, some part of my ego was just like eviscerated, as a 7-year-old. And I just couldn't stop crying for like 20 minutes after that. And I looked around and saw that nobody else in the room literally had this experience. Like I was the only one bawling, and I remember thinking, what's happening to me? And afterwards, I felt like I can't really talk about this experience with anyone because no one gets it, Like if they got it, they would be crying too. Like the profundity of that experience was just so beyond, and I couldn't possibly share it with others because they didn't enter that space with me. Even though we were all watching the same thing, they didn't enter that space with me. And so I think these two experiences of really being touched and being marked by unconditional love through this important human relationship and also through a direct connection with the divine, these were the things that continued to resource me through years and years of bullying and alienation and not feeling like I belong, not feeling like I was seen. And even though belonging continued to be really challenging for me throughout my life, the sense of I am who I am and I won't let other people change me on a fundamental level was something that I always carry with me. Sometimes to a fault. I remember my first job, I struggled a little bit because, my first boss was this really strong person who had really strong expectations, and I was a bit of a rebel, and that was challenging. But all in all, I had this unshakable sense that I would really credit for me even still being here, making it through, like sharing this with you, And so this to me is on so many levels such an interesting entry point to thinking about the Venus Cazimi in Aries, right? Venus in Aries had to fight. Aries is the land of Mars. Aries is the force of war, of strife, of competition. And Venus is the force of love, connection, and value, right? What Venus stands for is in some ways in antithesis to the landscape of Aries, right, which is ruled by Mars. And so Venus is tested here. Venus is asked to really live out their action, their values in action, right? Not just in words or in thought, but what does it mean to really practice your values in your everyday action? Venus is invited, maybe even forced, to love out loud. Venus is also retrograde, so Venus has been asked to go deep into the places that are hidden from the light, from the topside world. Venus is asked to look at their deepest fears in the eyes, and Venus is being asked, can you actually live in accordance to your highest ideals, which is love, when you are in a loveless place? Can you love those who do not love you back? Can you love yourself when others are not reflecting that love back to you? Can you love those who cannot love you in the ways you know you deserve to be loved? Can you surrender to the experience of unconditional love, of choosing to love and choosing love no matter what form love is currently available in? Aries is also about individuality. Aries is about how you are who you are, and that's that. You can try to hide, you can try to contort yourself to fit, you can try to camouflage your essence, but you can only go so far. At the end of the day, you know who you are, and wherever you go, no matter who you're surrounded with, there you are. And so Venus retrograde in Aries is, in traditional astrology, doubly afflicted, right? Venus is facing the challenge of moving in a place where there's not a whole lot of light. There's not a whole lot of illumination. And Venus is confronted with the reality of, who am I when I don't have all these bells and whistles that I usually have access to, right? What happens to us when our usual tools to accessing love is not available to us, right? And this Cazimi moment is a moment where Venus meets the sun. It's a very special moment in the Venus retrograde cycle. It's a moment where Venus is kind of invited into the domain of the sun, the kingdom of the sun, right? And in Aries, the sun is exalted. And the sun rules the divine, it rules illumination, it clarifies, the sun gives life to all things, it gives the substance needed to create nutrients, right? And to create literal aliveness. And Venus, in their underworld journey, is getting a recharge during a Venus Cazimi. Venus is given clarity right in the middle of the arduous, challenging journey. During this specific Venus Cazimi in Aries, the one that I'm recording this under, Mars, the ruler of Aries, is in Cancer, and this is the place where Mars is fallen. So this is an extra ouchy moment. Astrologically, this Cazimi is happening against the broader context of Mars in Cancer, right? Which is deep sorrow, deep questioning, deep mourning, deeply unsettled experience of not knowing how to charge forward, not knowing the right course of action, so to speak. So if you're listening to this episode at this moment, regardless of whether you're listening to it while, it's still Venus Cazimi or not, perhaps you're drawn to this episode because you're experiencing how hard it is to receive a reflection from other people that some deeper part of you, some essential part of you is not okay. And I want to be clear here. This experience sucks. Truly. This experience hurts. It doesn't matter if that's coming from your partner, if that's coming from your mom or some stranger on the internet. That shit hurts, you know? And the first thing I want to say to you is that there's nothing wrong with you, right? There's nothing wrong with what you're feeling in the moment. If you're feeling hurt by this experience, of course it hurts. Of course it sucks. So we begin there. It sucks that we live in a world where we have to contort just to survive, where we have to hide parts of who we are just to be accepted, where we have to talk a certain way or be a certain way just to keep the job, just to keep the friends, just to keep the status, just to be able to not be in trouble, right? It really, really sucks. I heard something that really kind of broke my heart the other day. There was this meme that pointed something out to the effect of, this isn't exactly the wording, but it says something like, every child who was bullied was also bullied at home. And every child who bullied another was also bullied at home. So in other words, both the quote-unquote victim and the perpetrator in this kind of situation experience some sort of pain, right, in their home of origin. And man, that just went straight to my heart. And this is how I interpreted that saying, right? That some erroneous belief, right? Some erroneous value, and value is a Venusian word here, was in the air when that child grew up, that made them think that it's okay to be treated like that or to treat other people like that, right? The experience of bullying others, the experience of invalidating another person's existence is actually deeply rooted in the place that did not receive unconditional love. Any time you see someone acting out of hate, or anytime you see yourself acting out of hate, some part deep within did not receive unconditional love. That's why it's behaving in that way. And I would take that a step further, right? Home here isn't just the actual home, right? It isn't just the primary caretakers. The concept of home is so much bigger, more nuanced, and more complicated than that. Home is the place of origin, right? Home is where we are knitted, where we were supposed, theoretically, to receive the kind of nurturing, the kind of safety that then sets us up to be able to grow and to then give out our fruits to the world, right? And home is never just the household. Home is planted in the country, right? In the government, in the religious institutions and the beliefs that are held by the community around the household. These are larger bodies that were meant to keep us safe, but they fail to do so. And there's pain there. That lack of safety is something that we carry, right? And so this is where we need to start. We need to start by recognizing, wow, that really sucks, right? It's not okay that you had to stand up for yourself. It's not okay that you had to defend yourself just for being who you are. Because ultimately, who you are is not only part of your humanity, who you are is also part of your divinity. The things that you love, the way that you see the world, the way you respond to the events around you, the people that you love, even your trauma patterns, all of them stem from some deep parts encoded in your DNA, and all of it has intelligence. All of it has intelligence. This is a hill I am willing to die on. I believe that every single part of us, no matter how hard we've been indoctrinated to believe there's something wrong with that part, every part of us deserves love. Because everyone and everything is a child of God. Everyone and everything is a fractal of the divine. And so we deserve love. And we are made of love. I almost want to end there because that is really the primary thing here, right? At the middle, in the middle of our collective altar here that we are creating in this digital liminal space. And that is to remember that you are divine. You deserve love. And you're made of love. And there's nothing you do or don't do, nothing you achieve or didn't achieve can take that away from you. And if you're in a moment where that feels hard to appreciate who you are on a deep core level, I want you to remember this. I want you to remember that who you are is a gift to this world. Who you are is a gift to yourself too. It's a gift that no one can ever take away from you. People can take your life. Governments can take away your rights. But your essence cannot die. Your essence will always be here in some shape or form. And that essence is the divine part of you. Final words. For those of you who would like extra pieces of integration, I want you to reflect on a couple things. To contemplate on a couple things. Number one, who in this life has shown you unconditional love? In this moment when things feel really hard, I want you to do the counterintuitive thing of remembering love. Remembering that if you have been connected to love at one point in time, time is not linear. And so you can reconnect with that love right now when it feels really difficult. I want you to get really quiet. You can even try this right now. I want you to connect with your heart, maybe even put your hand on your heart. And then ask yourself, who has shown me unconditional love? What has shown me unconditional love? Remember, it doesn't have to be another human being. It can be yourself. It can be a pet or an animal that you met out there in the wild. I remember once going on a hike and having this encounter with a deer and feeling just this tremendous love emanating from their way of being. It can be a place. It can be a spirit. It can be something non-human or more than human, right? The human world is actually quite small and quite a limited part of the world. There's so much more than the human world. And that non-human and more than human world can really resource us. The second thing I'd like you to reflect on is what forms of love are already present in your life. The number one thing that I see people struggling with is feeling, when they're feeling like there's not enough love in their life, there's usually some kind of clinging that's happening to either an idea of what love needs to look like in order for it to count as love, or a tight clinging to the belief that they don't deserve love. Right? And therefore, if you begin with not believing that you deserve love, whatever forms of love come your way, you're not going to be able to receive it. Right? Listen, you can't receive if your hands are gripping tightly. Right? You have to open up your hands. You have to let go of your grasp in order to let love in. And you have to let love in so you can actually enjoy what love wants to show you. And if you're not ready to receive love, that's okay too. Sometimes we need more time to heal. We need more time to keep rejecting the love until we can finally say, okay, fine, give it to me, right? We need more time to clear in order to receive love. But there's always some form of love lurking somewhere in there in your life that you can be grateful for. And this is not to bypass the pain, right? Not at all. This is not to bypass that you're currently moving through a challenging moment. You are. But gratitude is such a crazy little trick. It's honestly, I think gratitude is the biggest trickster. Maybe, I don't know. It's a toss-up between gratitude and dreaming. I think dreaming is also very much trickster, but that's for another episode. If you could somehow find it in your heart to connect with gratitude, I guarantee you, sooner or later, you'll see how much love is present in your life. And any little bit helps, right? And perhaps you can even enjoy it, you know? Okay, I think that's it for me. Maybe I'll read you a little something here. I've been really enjoying this book. It's called The Tao of Healing. One of my teachers shared it with me. And this is number 48 from this book by Haven Trevino. Science constantly adds to medical knowledge. It gets so complicated, who can understand it all? Love is very simple. It requires no thought or deed in order to work. Anyone can do it. Master the art of letting love happen. Love is very simple. It requires no thought or deed in order to work. Anyone can do it. Master the art of letting love happen. And specifically, what would it look like for you to master the art of letting love happen to you? Letting self-love happen to you. I hope that this episode has provided some nourishment, some guidance. I hope it's consoled you in some ways. And yeah, if you enjoy this, I would love to receive a review from you or for you to share it with members of your community. It really means a lot. This podcast primarily gets out there by word of mouth. And so, yeah, I would really appreciate it. I'm sending you so much love and so much care. And yeah, just know that whatever you're moving through, you'll get through this. You've gotten through it before, you'll get through it.